Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, The Credibility Gap. We are going to explore how HR and internal comms can prove the impact of employee experience and turn insight into influence, credibility and performance at work. I'm Eva, the manager of the customer engagement team here at Oak, and I will be your host today. I have a real passion for helping organizations build a culture of high performance by ensuring communication is measurable, strategic, and directly linked to business outcomes. I also understand the challenges faced in business when you're trying to engage your workforce and the importance of delivering value-driven insights to enhance employee experience too. Now, we'd love to hear from you. So please take a moment to visit the chat and let us know where you are joining from today. Please also feel free to ask your questions in here as well. Now, a couple of housekeeping points. Today's session is being recorded. Your mics and cameras will be off throughout the session, so please use that chat functionality to get in touch. The recording will be available within about half an hour after the session, plus we'll be adding it to our website in due course. So do please be mindful of sharing confidential information. So, what do we have in store for you today? Well, we're going to be looking at new research insights from over 250 HR and internal comms professionals and explore how to prove the business impact of employee engagement. I'm delighted to be joined by two guest speakers. So we'll have industry insight from the Institute of Internal Communication, the CEO, Jen Sproul, and we will also hear from Nick Hollis at Burger King, as he will take us through a case study there. Now, naturally, we will look at ways to connect comms metrics to real business outcomes and talk about practical steps to help you increase your influence with leadership. So, it's time to meet our speakers. Now, I am delighted to introduce Jen Sproul, the CEO of the Institute of Internal Communication.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. That's lovely to be here.
Delighted to have you here too, Jen. Thanks so much for joining us. And we also have Nick Hollis, the Head of Engagement at Burger King UK.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Nick and I've been at Burger King for 6 years now and look after all things engagement, benefits, internal comms and lots of other stuff in between. So nice to be here.
Thanks so much, Nick. Thank you. So, delighted to have you both with us today. Now let's have a look at why credibility matters. Now, credibility is, I would say, still a defining challenge for our internal communications. On paper, internal comms has never been more important. We're expected to shape culture, support transformation, improve engagement, and ultimately influence business performance. But in reality, there's often a bit of a disconnect. We're not always seen as strategic. We're not always invited to the right conversations early enough. And crucially, we're not always able to clearly demonstrate the actual impact that we're having. So, to better understand this challenge, we recently conducted a survey with internal comms and HR professionals across a range of industry. We wanted to get a clear picture of how internal comms is being perceived, where it's delivering real impact, and also what are the biggest barriers that still exist. Now, what we found was encouraging, but it did prove that there were still some definite gaps. So I'd like to take an opportunity now just to share a few of the the standout findings. So 48% feel like they're seen as a trusted strategic advisor with influence over leadership decisions, which is promising. However, only 30% can say that they effectively demonstrate the business impact of internal comms. There are also some really practical challenges coming through in the data, such as 60% lack visibility into whether internal comms are reaching, engaging, and influencing employees. We also see risk emerging in how people are communicating. One of the key standouts on this slide for me was that 86% are saying that shadow channels like WhatsApp are widely used for work-related communication. And when you take all of this together, it paints a really clear picture that internal comms is valued, but maybe it's not fully embedded, measurable, or optimized in the way that it needs to be. So with that in mind, I would love to bring in our speakers. And Jen, maybe I can come to you first. When you see these results, what stands out most to you?
I think what stands out most to me is that kind of, we're in this sort of juxtaposition, right, where we're being seen as more valuable, perhaps, in the stats that you're looking at, where you're saying people value, I have the ear of it. But we seem to be stuck between not being able to bring that sense of evidence and that sense of data and that sense of continuous involvement and being in a room that advises as opposed to just reports on what it's done, rather than it sort of sets the tone and the direction of an organization. So in one hand, we have a sort of greater ear happening, but we seem to have this sort of other space where we're not able to connect the two dots in a really succinct and evidence-led way that perhaps will help influence our credibility, but also become somebody in the room that is seen as somebody that is a trusted advisor that continually gives a heartbeat of the organization and helps inform decision making. We seem to have the remit to do it, but not the ability or the evidence to help us do that in a more compelling and more influential way.
Yeah, I think it's very true, and I think our stats kind of reflect that it's like you've got a seat at the table, but it's not. There's just a bit of a gap, isn't it? It's not quite having that ability to influence the leadership side of things at the same time. So, Nick, I'll come to you. What really resonates from your own experience with these stats that we've just kind of walked through there?
I think I'm just sort of looking at some of the stats on the other screen you shared before as well, that the information overload, I think, it's not a massive surprise that people are experiencing information overload. It was 66% was on that, and then 60% were saying that they lack sort of the visibility on whether comms are actually being effective or not. And they both resonate with us for sure. I mean, we used to have, when we used to send out emails, were people actually really reading it? Were they responding to it, or is it just being sort of deleted or ignored? And in a very busy environment that we work in with very tight labour, are we giving too much information, more than they need, and it's actually they're just unable to ingest it? So some of those for us they sort of resonate quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's that information overload is really telling in terms of I'm not sure that if you're putting out a comms and you're hitting everybody with that same communication, is every communication relevant to every single individual within business, or is there perhaps an opportunity to make sure that comms are targeted so that there's more importance and it's promoted perhaps more to people that really need to see it, but everyone else can discover and find it kind of organically if they need it to. So I think that's a real challenge in terms of being able to target comms to the right audience of people as well. That's super interesting. Thank you so much. So I think we are due to have our first poll. So I'll just give you a moment just to pop your votes in there. Give it just a couple more moments there before we close off our first poll. It's really interesting to see actually what you're finding is your biggest challenge when trying to demonstrate the impact of your work today. It's quite a spread of results there actually. Time and the wider visibility really stood out as the two kind of leaders, but there was a real spread there in terms of what the problems that our audience are seeing today. So that's super interesting to see. Thank you so much for your participation. There will be more polls coming up as we go throughout today's session, so we look forward to seeing your insights there too. Now, I would like to invite Nick to talk about his experience now at Burger King and just take us through a bit of a case study here.
Yeah, thanks, Eva. So we're obviously, everyone's sort of heard of Burger King. We've been around for almost sort of 50 years in the UK now, almost 70 years globally. But we're actually a very new business still. We're only sort of 5 or 6 years old as a master franchise, and we've gone from sort of 70 restaurants to 300 that we own and operate in the last few years. And the reason why I say that is because we've gone through massive growth very quickly, and from that sort of comes quite an inconsistent experience for people within the business. When you sort of amalgamate lots of previous companies or franchisees together, that was the situation where we're in, where we've sort of merged lots of companies together. So we were lacking I guess a platform to be able to communicate how we operate, our culture, and make sure that information was shared consistently across the company. That was a real struggle for us. We had sort of relatively low manager capability at points, and that was a bit of a problem for us. We had old school people processes that were really inefficient, lots of printing and signing and returning or sending stuff by post and all sorts of stuff like that. We had communications that were very scattergun approach of almost anyone in head office could just go and email restaurants and send out big 30 or 40 page documents, and it was not very well controlled at all. We didn't have any feedback channels or surveys, and we weren't really able to communicate to our frontline employees very effectively at all. So over the last few years, we've done a huge journey of a lot of manager upskilling for a start, making sure that they are really on the ball with their leading with empathy and managing their teams effectively, and managing their performance and absence and sickness. And the reason why that's relevant is, that's, I know it's not strictly communications, but that is employee engagement. And if the managers are looking after those people, then they're far more likely to be engaging with what you're doing as a business. And obviously it's the right thing to be doing. But we've gone through a lot of process refinement of bringing in a lot of automation and sort of forms, digital forms, toolkits to help managers do their jobs, and lots of new guides, but also trying to keep the content very light and visual and interactive where we can as well around those. Ultimately, it's sort of been about reducing friction for our managers. They are very busy, they're time poor, and we need to make it as easy for them to do their job. And a lot of that is effectively communicating stuff in the right way, and not overloading them with information. And when they have to do a task, trying to make it as easy as possible for them. We've launched employee surveys, and now we act upon that feedback that we gather. And we're very honest with the findings that we get as a business. We do communicate back into the business of, look, this is what you said, and this is what we're going to do about it. And over time, that has really helped to build a culture of trust, that actually, rather than it sort of being communications almost feeling like a one-way thing of head office communicating out, it's very much more of a two-way thing, showing that we are listening and sort of engaging with our teams to work and improve things. We've also done a lot of work around talent development and career pathways, DE&I, benefits, recognition, incentives, bonus schemes, and this is all very good, but we need a platform to do that, and that's where the BK Hub has really come in to help reduce friction for our managers, improve access for information, making sure that people are only getting content that's relevant to them at the right time that they need it. And over time, that's made quite a massive impact on the business. If we look at our engagement scores, they're now 5% above the industry average within hospitality, and we get an 86% response rate as well, which is pretty decent, particularly within our industry. We are a Sunday Times Best Places to Work and a World's Happiest Workplace as well for 2 years in a row, and top 100 in the hospitality sector. And our turnover in particular has gone from a peak of sort of 98% in April 2022, which was just before we launched the BK Hub. That's a whole business turnover. It's gone from 98% down to now 51%, and it's been going down month on month, every month for the last 4 years, which is pretty awesome. So there might be some people on this call that think, wow, that's still incredibly high, but actually within hospitality, that's a pretty reasonable number. So and a lot of that we can tie back to how we communicate things and how we do our culture, and we can measure that mainly through our engagement stats. But yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Bring myself back to life. It sounds it, Nick. It sounds like it's been quite a roller coaster in terms of just, the transition that you've gone through as an organization, and having to then bring everybody kind of into one umbrella and under one kind of comm strategy. It was really interesting to hear that as an organization, you've really focused on having that two-way comms as well, just in terms of that seems like a really big focus. Now, interestingly, and I've got a question for you here, tying it back into our research, where we found that just 35% of respondents said that their organization is very effective at reaching their frontline or deskless employees with timely and relevant information. And within Burger King, you have a big tranche of these employees that sit within that sector. So, I mean, with many organizations still struggling to reach that kind of proportion of their workforce, why do you believe that gap still exists, and what sort of approaches have you seen work well at Burger King?
It's hard, and I mean, I've not found a silver bullet yet necessarily, and if anyone knows of one, then please let me know. That'd be great. But yeah, I think at least from what I've seen from my experience within the businesses that I've worked in, that I think generally that gap can appear when there's a bit of a disconnect between who's writing or sending the comms and who's actually reading it. I think we as sort of comms professionals need to be able to challenge those subject matter experts and the senior leadership or whoever it is, and make sure that we cater those messages to the audience. There's been quite a lot of times in the past where I've had to say, look, I know that you're on, the executive team or whatever, but you are, a 50-year-old male, female, whatever, and you are not the recipient of this comms. I'm writing this comms for the 6,000 people out there that are aged sort of 18 to 25, and sometimes they just need to be, politely and healthily challenged sometimes to make sure that you are trying to make sure that is relevant to the audience. And understanding the audience is really important. Their age, their reading or language ability. We've got a lot of people that are from different countries. English isn't their first language. What's their professional level? Are you pitching it at that sort of, the right level there? And speak to the audience. Who's going to receive it? Speak to them and find out their challenges and ask for sort of brutal feedback on how you can improve. When they say that comms is, it's all fine, that's not very useful feedback. I really enjoy feedback where it's sort of, actually, this is a real pain in the backside, sort this out sort of thing. And that's what we've done over the years. If I've got a moment, I can quickly sort of give you a couple of tips to round off that question, if that's, yeah. I think, what we've seen is you won't see an instant fix or improvement necessarily, but through key stakeholder management and sort of engaging with them over time, that you might see a bit of a cultural shift, and that's what we've seen. It takes a bit of time, but I think when you're writing the comms, make sure that what's in it for them, basically. Particularly if it's an employee, we've got our employees that they don't need to be on our platform, or they don't need to read stuff unless it's mandatory for them. So why would they read it? So try and make sure there's a good, obvious, quick hook. Can you make it personal? Make it to the point. Is it the right channel or format for them? Which should it be, an email or a video or a push notification or whatever else it might be? And we've probably all been there as well, where you've received an email in your inbox where it looks really heavy and really big, and that instantly puts you off. So make sure that visually it looks like you can manage to read it in good time. Things like that. But I could go on, but I'm wary of time, so I better not.
That's all right. You'll have some opportunity to share some more insight and top tips later on as well. But it's really refreshing actually to hear from an organization where you really are embracing that two-way communication. You're not afraid to enable your employees to say, do you know what, this really isn't working for me. That might be quite hard to read sometimes when you think you've got it right, and people say, actually, no, that's not working. And from my experience in seeing what we see, and I see it day to day, is that the content that really resonates with employees is the stuff where there's something in it for them. We humans are inherently selfish. We want to know what am I going to get from having either engaged with a platform where communications are coming to me, or from reading this communication. Well, how am I going to benefit from this? And I think that, yeah, anyway, I could talk for hours on that, but we shall bring ourselves back and let's continue on into our kind of wider discussion. And the first thing I think that we're really going to chat about here is the influence and credibility in internal comms. Now, I guess almost half of our survey respondents, 48% in fact, say that internal comms acts as like a strategic advisor with influence over leadership decisions, but there's still many teams that are struggling to reach that position. Now, our research also found that 94% say that internal comms is respected, yet only 30% feel that they can effectively demonstrate that business impact. So I'm curious to hear, and Jen, I've got a question for you here. Where our research is showing that internal comms is widely respected, yet many teams struggle to demonstrate the measurable impact, what, in your opinion, is the reason for that gap still existing?
I think the gap comes from where we've come from as a profession. And I think we carry that historic role where we know we need to tell people stuff, but actually communication is much more bigger than that. So if we look at our origins, and I think and it will vary in organization to organization. It's great to see how much of a wide view you took at Burger King, Nick, as well. But I think that where we are now in some organizations, we're still stuck in this position of being we're the people that send stuff out. We're information disseminators. We're sharing and delivery mode. We manage channels and we keep people informed. People might respect the importance of that, but that means you're putting yourself in a position where the only way you can demonstrate your impact is by showing outputs versus outcomes. And I think that we are making impact, but we're kind of stuck in trying to make that demonstrable through old methods. It's like we're a sort of historic legacy function that is also trying to map into a future function, which is a wider, more impactful place. And our measurement approaches and the way we go about that has to change with that. It has to shift with that. And therefore, then how can we shift the way we talk about what we're there to deliver for an organization beyond being somebody that sends something out and makes sure people know stuff? Because there are other ways of evidencing. We just need to catch up with that shift. And we need to find new ways of doing that. So I don't think it's about ICs and delivering its impact. And we know it's respected. But I think there's a massive opportunity here for us to reposition the value we add in a more outcome level, but also not just about this obsession I think we have sometimes with saying, well, let me do this, come back and say it made this. But like what Nick was exempling there as well is getting better at being kind of the internal intelligence unit of an organization that advises before something happens or before something goes wrong. So you're thinking about that constant stream of information, that constant monitoring. And I think the organizations that have to rapidly move, shift and adjust in 3 month, I would say, timeframes, a year is not enough. We need to have a much more fluidness to the way that we do things. So I think that we are respected and we are truly influential, but we need to close that gap in how we demonstrate our role and our strategic capability and how we build intelligence, evidence, and provide a continuous support mechanism across functions, across stakeholders. So I think it comes from our history and whilst we're mapping into our future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, yeah, everything you said just resonates. I think there is a real, it's that you do get driven by that, right? Well, if it was 10% now, I need to show that I've increased it to 15%, but actually there's more things at play. And there's other things that you can do to measure that impact that, you're having through those comms.
Absolutely.
Another question for you, just to kind of follow on, for teams that aren't yet seen as like strategic advisors, what practical steps can they take to secure a seat at that table, or at least a voice kind of in those leadership discussions? It sounds like from what Nick was saying at Burger King, you've got that kind of voice where you can advise your senior leadership to say, no, don't send that message let me do what I'm doing. I know how to do this. What advice do you have, Jen?
Yeah, I think it's going to sound really obvious, because I think it is to some degree really obvious, but it's just really scary to do sometimes as well. And I think that sometimes we don't feel that sense of being seen and valued, but what you have to convey is absolutely critical. But the things I would say when you're talking about that, it's kind of obvious, right? What is the business dealing with? Like Nick's just given examples there where you need to reduce retention. You can fly in, solve a problem, be aligned to a business goal, show an objective, show that your work contributes towards that wider outcome for an organization. Find out, go and meet your stakeholders. What are the pain points they're dealing with? What are the big issues that the business needs to solve that you can then frame that around? Be somebody that really understands the pulse of the organization day to day. I would also make sure that your business acumen is up. Read around what's going on, read around those trends, have that sense of credible, insightful knowledge. And I think that the thing I would say is we're trying to influence human beings, so get to know them as human beings and how I can build a relationship that meets them. But also make sure that when you're looking at stuff, you build this constant stream in yourself that allows you to provide really good judgment and advice on good principles, whether that's ethical judgment, whether that's evidence-led judgment, whether that's insight-led judgment, and make sure that you can be somebody that thinks, rather than go, well, I'll go away and do that, add critically, but why would that help? Would that not help? And challenge back, because if you just take an order, then you're not a credible advisor, if that makes sense. So I think it's all within us. We're all doing it. It's just sometimes a bit scary. And I think to start with, just build those relationships really and feed into how you can solve a problem.
Yeah. And be brave as well. It sounds like it's kind of the message as well. Like it might feel uncomfortable to challenge somebody who's perhaps a senior leadership member, but actually they'll probably respect you for that because you've listened and you've thought about it and you've gone, are you sure you want to do that? Can I just give you a little bit of advice? And then that starts that conversation. You start to build those relationships as well with your kind of key stakeholders. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Now I've got a question that I'm going to put to both of you. I'll come to you first, Nick. You haven't spoken for a little while. Let's bring you back into the conversation. So when leadership teams are making decisions about internal initiatives or perhaps organisational change, in your experience, how likely are they to involve internal comms early in the process? Or are you a bit more, does it happen later on, do you find?
I think, I think I'm still trying to win that overall battle or war or whatever, but I mean, it's definitely got a lot better for sure over the last few years. I think it's taken quite a bit of time of building trust and credibility within the business for sure, but now we're at the stage where most people do come to me and get me involved. And I think what's been really helpful is that we're now able to sort of really give some good insights around our people and communication as well. So when we're making decisions, a lot of that now is based off really credible data and feedback that we receive through our engagement surveys in particular. So we ask about sort of 20 questions in our engagement survey, and we do that twice a year. And because we get such a good response rate of around 86%, it was in the last one, we know that information is really, really credible, and that helps us to guide our people strategy and how we do things within the business, and that goes everything from how we share information to health and well-being and all sorts of stuff. But that has helped to, I think you mentioned about sort of how do we demonstrate the real business impact. Well, what we can do is from all that insight, we can then build action plans that are very much at a very, very local level and implement them, and then over time we can see how things have changed, and then at the end of it we feed back to our exec or whoever else to say, look, these were the issues that we found and this is what we've done about it, and now we've this is the result thanks to X, Y and Z. And when we share the results, we just try and tie it back to whatever you think is most relevant to them. It could be, generally it's time. A lot of we've saved our managers X amount of time, and that's time is money, essentially, a lot of the time, and low retention and all that sort of thing. So yeah, data is really important in that.
Okay. So do you find that really, like when you're sharing and collating that data and sharing with your executive team, do you feel like that's helped build that relationship and therefore they're bringing you into conversations about communications, if there's made kind of a strategic change that needs to be made, they're like, oh, these guys over here are really useful. They've kind of got the, you understand the people on at the ground level, should we call them that, the people on the front line. So therefore they bring you in. It's really interesting to hear. That's like a good strategy. And I think it alludes to what Jen was saying as well about kind of like challenging or perhaps opening those conversations and putting yourself out there to say, hey, I can help with whatever your strategic outcome is that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, the really good thing is about data is that you can't really argue with it. It's quite black and white. It's not necessarily your opinion. That's what's happening, and so it can't be brushed off too easily.
Yeah. This is what people are saying. I haven't made this up, but I promise. Yeah. Jen, from your perspective, what do how would you what do you see in terms of leaderships when they wanted to have conversations about internal initiatives or organizational change? Do you think that they're involving internal comms early enough in the process, or?
I think they are in some cases and they aren't in many other cases. I think there are improvements happening, and I see that when I go out and I talk to internal communication professionals in a variety of organizations, where you'll go and speak to one person and go, oh yeah, I'm part of this, I'm in the meetings, and you go speak to somebody else and go, no, it just comes to me when they've made a decision. So I think that there is movement, but we're still in a place where we haven't, I think, fully accomplished that in the room at the beginning of the process piece. I think the thing as well, and I picked up on what Nick was saying as well, is that, and it always strikes me as bizarre, but that's just my brain, that people don't think communication is an important part of the early design process, when everybody knows the evidence out there is that change fails because of poor communication. But we'll just got to keep championing that, and I find that from a leadership point of view a strange blind spot that perhaps some have when it's kind of a well-known business issue. But I think the thing I would say as well to add on to Nick's really good advice is that what you can be a great barometer of, and what I'm hearing a lot of actually at the moment, is that organizations are trying to change and transform at such a pace, whether that's a structural change, a merger and acquisition, whether that's a system change, a process change, an AI adoption change, et cetera. And I think there's sometimes this assumption that people are resistant to change, but I don't think people are resistant to change at the moment. They're just resistant to, why are you doing this? Why should I get on board with you? And I talk to a lot of people that say to me, well, the change isn't happening. It's all because you haven't created the cultural conditions for change to be adopted at the first point. But the other thing I would say to add on to that is, so what we need to be thinking about is, how can we become an air traffic control unit? Because often actually I speak to organizations where there's 5 different change transformation departments that don't even speak to each other. So how are you supposed to green light and red light and know? But it might be that's okay because it speaks to different audience groups. That one person only has experienced one change. But we need to become a much better person that's knowing what's going on in that business to provide that sort of air traffic control point of view, because you've got to get cut through and you've got to be seen. I think the other thing as well we could add on to that is how then, when we're thinking about how we would advise in those environments that say we're in the room, how do we position our role as huge risk management in change adoption? The main thing a leader is going to be concerned about, let's just say if it's a massive system change, they're probably spending hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of pounds. If that's late, that's going to cost them hundreds and tens of thousands of pounds. So these are the risks that they're playing with. So it's got to put it in that financial say. And so from a communication point of view, what are the risks in that project that are most likely to happen? What's the score of those? And how can I mitigate that risk from happening? And then once you've got that, it kind of gives you a framework to go how I would advise from that outset decision making. And then going on to Nick's point as well is, let's not worry about, I think we get the comms that we send it out and we go, it's red. But we need to think about the pre, the during, and the post. Where are we from to where we're trying to get through? And as we're going through a project, what are the milestones that is blocking that adoption or that change? It probably could be because people don't understand it. They don't trust it. They suspect it. They're confused by it. They don't have the time for it. But if we built in the monitoring to understand that through the process, then we can course correct as things goes on. So I think that those are some other things I would add on as ways to think about it.
That's perfect. Thanks so much. I think I've got another question for you here, Jen, which is just from your perspective at the IOIC, what tends to work best when organisations successfully embed internal comms into strategic decision making?
I mean, if we were to take it at a fundamental sort of why are we here, what's the point of us level, as a function that delivers strategic capability to an organization, we're here to make sure that you have strong reputation, that strategy is delivered. We're here to look at human behavior and how we take people with us, and how we're going to create those fundamental pieces of the pie that make that happen as a continuous piece. So I think we need to be much clearer and much sharper. That's something we're working on at IOIC as well, in that why are we here and what is it that we do that is going to add strategic capability and value to an organization. And I think there is a lot going on in complexity right now, that the wrong step, the wrong move, the wrong thing will break. And we're often trying to make really quick and rash decisions. As leaders, I mean that, not necessarily internal communicators, but always trying to move at pace. So if you can be that person, I can phone up, like you would say a leader would phone up their FD, go, can I spend this? Where's the shareholder price? What's happening over there? You want to be that person in the organization that they phone up and sort of go, right, we need to move in this direction. We need to move in that. What will that mean? Reputational risk? Can we deliver the change to human behavior? How can we make sure we're trusted? What are the things that we need to do? And really bed ourselves into how we drive success in a strategic outcome narrative. We know there's all the things that to do that are beneath the surface, but let's just talk at that top level.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of cross-functional working that needs to happen.
I don't think there's enough relationships. And I think that we've got some research coming as well, looks at it from the employee perspective as well. But I think that also we are in a different working world where we are all just generally as human beings more difficult, more complex, working more siloed. We're working more transactionally than we ever used to. We stay inside our departmental bubbles because that's the world that we have. So for us, it's how do we spread ourselves out to make sure that we're embedded in those conversations, and bring that sense of organizations will probably be here and relevant in the years to come if they can manage that resilience in their organization.
Yeah, 100%. So Nick, from a practical perspective at Burger King, what has helped you move from simply reporting communication activity to demonstrating that real business impact? And I think you've touched upon this a bit already, but
yeah, I think it's just taken time and a lot of stakeholder sort of engagement, really. There's been a lot of relationship building, a lot of building trust internally of what the comms that we put out and how they go down, and the tone of language that we use and how it's interpreted by employees. And so I think I probably gave most of my stuff away in the previous question.
Yeah, and I guess like the retention metrics as well is one of those key kind of like, that's really I don't want to even say the word demonstratable. Yeah. There's a proper way of saying that. I can't get that out.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, I sort of mentioned our overall retention earlier, that we've gone from 98% down to about 54% now, which is pretty awesome to see. And but when we look at some of the more sort of, if we sort of zoom right in on some particular actions we've done, particularly around actually on the BK Hub and how we've sort of treated our onboarding. So, for instance, we used to have quite a lot of people that would be hired for a role and then didn't turn up on their first day. And that was costing the business quite a lot of money. That would be, spending hours of managers recruiting people, doing screening calls and sifting CVs and all that sort of thing. And then for them to not turn up was not ideal. So we did a fair bit of work there to try and work out what was going on. And we landed on managing to create a much better onboarding experience for those people, so that as soon as they were hired, they got a welcome into the BK Hub straight away. So rather than there being like a gap of nothing for a few weeks between being hired and their first day, they were able to get straight into the BK Hub, experience the Burger King culture. They would have videos and FAQs about what to expect on their first day to sort of try and calm any nerves and any uncertainties that they might have. Because for a lot of these people, they're sort of 16, it might be their first job. And it's quite a daunting experience if you think back to when we were a bit younger a few years ago. But it's quite a big thing. So we try to make that onboarding experience as engaging as possible. They could even sort of contact their new manager and their team through a chat function through the BK Hub as well.
That's communicating with them straight away. Like as soon as they've got the job offer, you've already started to communicate with them. You're not leaving them hanging in limbo.
Exactly. Yeah. And from that and those actions, and also sort of stripping away other information they didn't need to see at that stage, we kept it really nice and simple for them.
It's what you need to know now. You don't need to know all of this other noise that you're going to know on day one. You're not going to need to know how to do the particular task that you're asked to do, but this is it's that kind of general welcome. And I guess that gives you a nice, it's no wonder you've got these awards about being the happiest place to work, because you've got people coming in and you're kind of putting your arm around them at the very beginning and going, this is what it's like to work here. We're going to communicate with you from before day one. Basically. Yeah,
absolutely. And we've got some brilliant managers, but I think, and it's a lot of it's all testament to them really, but the work that we've done there around the onboarding has really shown them that's really delivered quite a big impact, and something that we can show back to the business as well. I mean, I think we've reduced by between 30 to 40% dropout rate, which when you look at all the hours and then the cost involved with that, that's quite a sizable sum. So that's one example that we managed to show of delivering a return on investment and delivering some impact anyway.
That's perfect. Thank you. I think we are due for another poll, so I shall get that launched and you can give us your opinions. So this one is on his leadership asked you tomorrow to demonstrate the impact of your internal communications on business outcomes. How prepared would you feel? I'll give you just a couple of moments to pop your votes in there. I'll give it just a couple more moments. Amazingly, literally nobody has said we have strong tools or data to show impact. Or we have one vote in now, or a couple of votes in, so 6%. But that's, yeah. There's a lot of people saying they could estimate. A few saying they still wouldn't know where to begin. Thank you so much for your insight. It's interesting to see just kind of our audience here today. There was only one person that led the charge. Eventually someone went, yes, okay, I think I know this. So that's very telling and very much in line with the stats that we have drawn up as well. So moving the conversation on to how do we prove that return on investment isn't a one size fits all? Now, our research showed that some sectors demonstrate the impact of internal comms more effectively than others, with manufacturing and hospitality actually able to report stronger results, while some of the sectors that we looked at, like healthcare and education, find it more difficult to prove and measure that impact. Now, the internal comms teams, they often act as a gateway for communication between leadership and departments and frontline employees, and we've chatted about that already this afternoon. And much of that impact can be difficult to quantify. So a question for you, Nick. I'm working obviously in the hospitality industry. What are some of the positive outcomes you've seen when engagement initiatives are working well across the restaurant teams?
Well, I mean, for a start, we've got happier employees, which is always a bonus, isn't it, for any business? We've noticed that through sort of various surveys that we've managed to do, that they're generally less stressed and anxious about work and life generally, which means that they're also able to focus better on work and also able to sleep better, which is definitely a good thing for them. We know that through our metrics that they feel safe at work, they feel more valued, and because of that, that all really contributes hugely into a much more productive and positive environment for people to work in, where they really, really enjoy what they're doing. And I mean, we're now seeing lots of posts on the BK Hub, which is lovely, on the social page, where there's a lot of celebration around, people being promoted or personal sort of achievements they might have done. And it's becoming really quite a nice sort of community where people are going not necessarily for work stuff, but actually because their engagement is really quite high, they're going there to see what their friends are up to, or to celebrate their friends or their region. They sort of feel like almost as a business that they're part of a much wider team, not just the people that are immediately around them. So that's some of the benefits we've been seeing. And of course, I mean, the more I guess the ones that impact the bottom line are those that sort of we're seeing lower sickness and absence, which again is really good. Lower employee turnover, and high productivity, that we're able to do the sales that we need to, but with less people, because they are more engaged, more efficient, more productive, so it's all good stuff.
I mean, it just goes to show, doesn't it, that communication really is that, if you have effective comms that's going out, the other things that can impact across a business is not just about people knowing what they're doing. It's, people are going to sleep better. You'll probably see if people got less absenteeism, which costs the business less money. So there's a whole load of things that are perhaps unseen impacts that people forget about. It's not just about delivering that message. So Jen, a question to you. Internal comms teams are often described as the glue, or the connecting all those departments across the organization. From your experience, what are some of the unseen ways that internal comms creates values that organizations may not always recognize? I know Nick's touched upon some of those there, but do you have any others to add into that conversation?
I think there's many things that we do that Nick's right, that add value, that aren't seen. And I think it's maybe a way we describe it, but fundamentally in any organization, it wants to be successful and it wants to perform. Now, what that applications of success will look like will be different in Burger King to a healthcare organization, to a charity, to a public sector. But performance comes from a collective action of the people around us and what we do, and then being there with us. And I think one of perhaps the ways that is, and sometimes I get the point that it's really hard to go, well, that's how we're doing it through this specific data point, right? But what makes a high performing organization? What is actually we're trying to do is that glue that connects leadership, people. The view is, what is the future of leadership? It's somebody setting a vision for something and people be wanting to follow it and deliver it and be part of it. That's fundamentally, and actually I think that in many organizations at the moment, I just think societally at the moment, we have an increasing distrust, an increasing wariness. But if organizations want to adapt, they want to innovate, they want to, whether that's please shareholders, sell something, whether it's come up with new products or mitigate disasters or manage through crises or stop a dodgy, bad brand reputation or hire the best talent and keep the best talent in my community, that is going to be done by the work that happens beneath it, where people feel like I am aligned and I can go where it's going and I believe them and I have faith in them and I'm going to sit behind that vision. And that's, I think, a lot of work to be gone that goes into creating that. It isn't just as simple as saying, well, let's just write a nice email. If you just chucked out communications without care and attention, or you just chucked a leader and didn't think about coaching them into what they're saying and how they're saying it, because you're going to give the sentiment of what the people are feeling. Because many people, when you look at the wider space, just feel like, you don't get me, you don't care about me. And that emotional, human connected tissue, I think sometimes we're afraid of saying what we do is really human and emotional and the power of it because it feels fluffy, when actually it is the intrinsic thing an organization needs if it's going to be successful on this success measure that defines for itself. So I think it's to be proud of that and to shout louder of the importance of that. And how that shows up in their organization. And being somebody, I always say as well, that can be a diagnostician of a business, of why they're not performing. And that diagnostician might be by going in to observe, like we'll talk about, we care, our culture, our values, or the way we talk. Are you really listening and tuning in to the way the organization speaks, the way people talk? Because it might be that you can be the one that diagnoses why they're not delivering on those successful values, because they haven't created a condition and an ecosystem that allows that to thrive, because they've missed the human in the loop.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think we could talk all day, couldn't we, in terms of things and like, ways in which you can help, improve your worth as an internal communicator within your organization. Just before we move to the Q&A, I'm going to call on you both for one kind of practical thing that you would advise an internal comms person to do this week that would help them demonstrate that return on investment on their work more effectively. Nick, I'll come to you first.
I mean, I sort of see this internally at work sometimes, that people make the mistake of trying to go down the route of likes and comments to try and show the worthiness of something. And I think that's just, it's not helpful. I think one of the easiest ways that I've managed to show impact is trying to sort of measure how something was before, whether that's how much time something took, like a process or something, and then what's that mean in money terms or hours, and then rework it all, and then remeasure it at the end, and then see what the difference is, and you're able to give a quantifiable sort of answer of, hey, we've saved 3,000 hours because of X, Y, and Z that we've just done. So go down that route. I think money and time.
And Jen, the same question to you.
Yeah, money is always going to talk. I agree with Nick on that one. But I think just to build on, I think Nick's example is a great one. Another one I would say is, don't be afraid to experiment and pick one thing and pick something really small. So find one area, like Nick's given an example of the hours people are spending on a process that is, you're hearing from one of your stakeholders, maybe you're working with the ops function or whatever that's giving you a real problem. They're looking, take that one issue and then think about, well, what would be the communication barrier to that? And think about, just rip up the rule book for a minute on, well, how could I dig that out of a measurement or a dashboard, and go, what new type of collection and insight could I trial to show if that works? And it might be that you would trial a really small, maybe I did a bit of listening, could I unearth something? Or maybe if I tuned into listening to those social channels and see what people, are people complaining that when they hit that submit button, it just freezes? And try a different approach to find some evidence that helps you to find a way of showing, well, because this, I can communicate and improve that, it might solve that. So just find something small, find something that has a value, try and experiment, and try and find a different set of data and insight, or a different way of gathering that insight that just, take away the kind of, I guess, the, what's the thing when you put on your bikes? I can't remember.
Stabilizers.
Yeah.
Thank you. Of old methods, and just have a go at doing something really small and really focused, and see if that gives you a whole new rich way of doing things that you've never thought about.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, we've got some great questions that have come in. So if you haven't already asked a question, we'll try and get through as many as we can, but we will have to draw to a close at the end of the session. But first question we've got that's come in here. So how has the Burger King Hub directly impacted your manager's work and communicate, how your managers work and communicate information? Let me pull this on stream so you can have a read whilst it's on there as well.
Right.
And have they given you any feedback on how it's helped them?
So through the Hub, we've managed to, so we used to send stuff out into the business by email. I say we, I mean, a whole range of people used to send stuff out by email, and it would get lost over time or hard to relocate. And I mean, how people were able to put new product launches out there when it was all in across 10 different emails, I've got no idea how they used to do that. So the Hub now has really helped our managers mainly around that. So when we do all these product launches every year, do about 8 or 9 a year, everything they need all is in one place, super easy to find, and that's one of the key things. And also how we manage our policies and things like that. Feedback, I've had a bit of feedback. The main thing actually is that because I've not had any noise, that is probably a sign that it's all going well as well, because when it goes wrong, they are very happy to make a lot of noise. So the fact that it's quiet means it's going all right.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And I've got another question here from Carlos. How do you manage contradictions amongst teams and employees that have different perspectives from the same comms, and how do you measure it and act upon it? Jen, I might come to you for kind of advice in that scenario, first of all, please.
Yeah, I think the first advice, it's a really complex one, and it's a really good question, and it's one that's not always as simple as things, but I think that it's a reflection, that question, of the times that we're in, when we feel really polarized and there's not a safe psychological safety to express difference or to have a different emotion or a different impact. But for me, what I would do to help me understand that, and I think was something we can adopt much more so in comms, is personas. So we can really map all that data into one thing to understand where those different views come from. We've done it quite a lot in some of the work that we've done at IOIC when we've looked at the wider space of how employees feel. And sometimes if you persona those people that, you know, well, this person feels this and they're 20% in this place or 30% in this place. And it's generally the pain point for them is they just don't buy the leadership, or the pain point for them is they actually don't get the contact because you haven't actually given that, or the language or the way it was expressed. And that then helps you to think about, how do I adapt that perhaps style? Is there a universal style? Is there a way in the middle where perhaps there's a lot of people that we kind of, they're on the edge of it, but if you fix this one thing, that might help. So I think personaing is a really good way to understand why that is happening and what are the comms points that perhaps we need to think about. So I look at them as a series of humans that perhaps are looking in that way. And I think personas, like I say, it's a really helpful way to do it.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much for your insight. And we've got several more questions here. I'll see if we can probably got time for maybe one, maybe two more. So the next question here is request for tactical tips on how to bridge the gap between a small company that's half scientists and half marketing/sales. For example, do they need to learn about each other's distinct worlds beyond lunch and learn, for example?
Yeah, that's hard. It's a bit of a different environment to what I operate in, for sure. But I think it's building personal relationships internally. I would think try not to go straight off the bat with sort of talking about work necessarily, but get to know them a bit more and build some just some personal relationships with them a little bit more and get to know each other, because by doing that, when you start to give some feedback or commentary on how things should be done, they will sort of know where you're coming from a bit better than if the feedback comes cold, I think. So if you've got a bit of rapport with that of the team first, it helps them to be a bit more open to feedback and considerations. But I think that's a time of trying to get more time together, talking through projects, probably of how, you know, what are you both trying to achieve here and how you can sort of try and come together. I think that's the best I can answer on that one, I'm afraid.
Anything to add from you, Jen?
No, I would agree with that. And I think it's just, the other thing I say, looking at those distinct two audiences, they are understand the personality types that we have in and the traits. So, you know, a scientist will think in one brain or has a sort of risk-averse brain, or a salesperson will think in a very different brain and will dial into comms in a different way. Also, as well, I think it's about making sure it feels, so therefore the way we want to connect with others feels appropriate to me and my personality type. You can't, what do I mean by that? So if there are organizations, do you know that those people are introverts, extroverts, their preferences, their types, where they feel safe, what they feel comfortable in, and there's an environment to connect with another. So I try and understand them humanly and try and find then the tactics that kind of go, well, actually, they seem to kind of connect on this. Or actually, if I position content in these two sorts of ways, or the way we speak around here, or the language that's used, they can help them feel more like it's safe to talk to each other. And I don't know if that helps, but I would really start to understand their personality and their motivations and what makes them feel safe to communicate.
I think that's great advice. Thank you so much. Well, we're very close to time, so I'm afraid that will be the last question that we're able to ask live today. And the last thing that I have to do is really just to say a massive thank you to both Jen and to Nick for joining us today. I very much appreciate you giving up an hour of your time to come and talk to everyone here today. And also a lovely thank you to everyone who has joined us online and for your wonderful questions. And we very much hope to see you again with us next time.